had this really cool package arrive at mine a few weeks ago now. This here is a bulk lot of Lord of the Rings toys that released from the Toybiz company in the early 2000s, I think. I believe from memory this was the first ever toy line that I was obsessed with as a kid, this and the Star Wars prequels toys. I bought this from a seller for about $100 NZD. There's around 10 figures in here in total as well. These bulk lot videos are a personal favorite of mine to cover here on this channel. All of the figures still seem to be sealed, which made the auction that much more appealing for me, but the figures I believe are mostly reissues and re-releases. At least some of them definitely are. I know this because I actually do have a couple of these guys, but the packaging mine came in was different back in the day, and they also featured more accessories, but I'll cover that when we get around to it. This is every figure that I have here laid out, all 10, and of the 10, only 7 of them are unique characters. I have double ups here of Frodo, Legolas, and Aragorn. Sorting these guys into their separate movies now, we have here 2 Frodos and Bilbo from the Fellowship of the Ring. You can immediately see the difference here between the middle Frodo and the others on the sides there. Now the back of our boxes here show all sorts of information, and I love this weird era of early 2000s toys, just walls of text and details that overlook every single interactive feature of the toys. Frodo here has some sword attack action if you squeeze his legs. I love the play features on these Lord of the Rings toys, especially when I was younger. There's a little description on the character here and a quick look at the demonstration of those features. He's dated on the back as 2005, which is long after the Fellowship of the Ring actually released. This figure here is a re-release of a figure from, I believe, 2001, actually releasing alongside the movies and featuring much better accessories, as you can see from this image here. This Frodo included a little background display and an interactive ring feature too, so it is a little disappointing to see that the re-releases here were the same figures without the cooler additions. And this here is the superposable Frodo based on the first time that we see him in Fellowship of the Ring. The packaging is immediately different this time around, which I think was a way to indicate that this was a brand new figure for the line, because the other Frodo and Bilbo were both re-releases. He is dated the same year as the last guy from 2005. And finally here we have Bilbo, another really cool looking figure that's missing his original display. He does still include a ton of great accessories though, more descriptions here, and the figure does have a few demonstrations to showcase how all of his special features work. Bilbo here includes quite a few cool inclusions like a traveling stick, his book, a bedroll, sting, and a mithril shirt. This guy is actually dated as releasing in 2003, which was when the movies roughly ended. And on to the Two Towers now, we have 4 figures in total: Possessed King Theoden, 2 Aragorns, and a Legolas. The Possessed King Theoden is both the least interesting and also one of the most interesting figures here. I can't believe they made this guy a toy back in the day, but that's also a compliment there. It's just always crazy to me when a toy line has a guaranteed peg warmer. The back of the box here just shows that figure standing and a description on the character, because he has no special features whatsoever. He was dated as a 2005 release as well. Looks like this was his only ever release too. The Legolas figure here looks pretty awesome, I must say. First figure here to release with a special display piece, like he's got a try me entry point on the box and everything. On the back of that box here we do have a lot of walls of text, description on Legolas here, and then a couple of details on his features. He includes quite a few very good looking accessories like many different weapons and a battery operated display stand, dated as being released in 2004, so that's another figure who didn't release alongside this movie. The Aragorn figures here are quite an interesting pair: Helm's Deep Aragorn and Battle Action Aragorn. The Helm's Deep dude over here features sword slashing action, whereas the Battle Action dude over here features sword attack action. Interesting. If it wasn't obvious already, I believe these are the exact same figure with a surprising amount of detail changes actually. Very similar to what we would see today with the likes of Hasbro Spider-Man figures. The biggest difference here that I can see comes down to the accessories. This guy has a pretty cool looking knife on his back, whereas the other one doesn't, so instead he features a smaller blade that fits in the sheath. The back of the boxes here show that the figures do have the same moves as one another. You can squeeze their legs for a sword attack slashing action, and the dates on the back do show that the releases were in fact different. The Helm's Deep figure released in 2003, which is again after that movie at this point, and the other Aragorn figure released in 2005, like so many of these other figures have been as well. We now move on to Return of the King releases, which features here Sam, Gollum, and Legolas. Again, Sam I think is the most unique figure here. He's featured in his orc disguise armor, which was something that was a lot more explored in the extended editions rather than the theatrical cuts. He also features a display base here just like Legolas. You can press the button and some sounds will appear. However, my toy has clearly died over these years being stuck in this package. The back of his box here shows us some more details of the toy, up close description there, and details on how to work his current features. He's got a couple of weapons and a helmet and the interactive display stand. He was dated as releasing in the year 2004, the year after the movies ended. For Legolas here we do have the superposable sticker, and the toy tells us that he throws some daggers figures quite well. It seems to be his only accessory though, so he seems quite lackluster compared to the other one that we looked at earlier. The back of his box shows us more descriptions on that character and the feature that every Legolas figure had, which was a shooting arrow type feature. Here though it's used for firing daggers instead. Date of release of, you probably guessed it, 2005. Gollum here rounds us out, and he was the sole reason I actually bought this bundle. Gollum was one of the first toys that I loved as a kid, and unfortunately I lost him when I was quite young. This is a definitive re-release because the Gollum toy that I had was this exact figure, but he had a giant wall display which you would use to make him climb. This guy is yet again missing the extra display piece. The back of the box here shows the character description and some details that showcases that he's holding the one ring. It's just molded into his hand there. He is also dated as releasing in 2004, 1 year after Return of the King. And I won't be looking at all of these figures because, like I mentioned, I do have some of them already, so the figures I will be looking at in this video are these three right here, one per movie, and the main three that I was really wanting to open anyway. Gollum, like I mentioned, was the reason I bought this bundle in the first place, so he's my obvious choice. As for the Legolas figures, the amount of extras that are included in the Two Towers one is just crazy to me, so he has to be the one that I open up. And as for Frodo, I actually happen to have this exact same figure sealed that I bought from a convention a couple of years ago, and I've been waiting to open him for years now. This one is already coming away from the packaging too, so it's a very easy decision. But I did really want to open up one of these Aragorn figures. I was debating between the two different knives included, and that's literally all there is to it. This guy has the blade at the back, but this guy doesn't. He instead has a smaller one for his sheath. The other problem I have though is that I know that I have one of these figures in my collection already, and I don't remember which one it is, so I would rather open the newer figure for obvious reasons. I decided to go with the later release just because he looks like a better figure to me. The details and the material differences I think are a bit more interesting to talk about. So let's get on with it. Opening up each figure was incredibly easy compared to what I'm used to for today's standards. There was no tape around these corners or anything, just me ripping into plastic. Here are all of the figures out on display, and with all of their accessories. We have a few cool items here, but Legolas definitely wins this round. He comes with as many accessories as the other three figures do combined. And our first figure here is Gollum, and he's really weird. He feels very fragile given his ultra articulated body there. Some up close details show that the face is quite menacing to look at, bulging blue eyes and spotty molding for his 9 strands of hair. He features some scarring on his back as well, and a ton of this weird looking red paint is everywhere. I can't tell if it's intentional or not. Like, it looks like it would be a really good idea, but it also appears really smeared all over. You can also actually see the flesh tone paint is peeling away from that shoulder joint on my figure. I mentioned before in the packaging shots, he does feature the one ring in his hand permanently. The other hand has been posed with 2 fingers to be inspecting the ring. The legs also feature some weird detailing where the covering here just somehow stops right above the ankle. Again, I'm not too sure what's supposed to be going on there. Articulation wise though, which is the most important thing for this guy, we've got some head movements here, very carefully showing that the arm moves up here, and the arm can also rotate in the same spot. It's one single bend in the elbow joint there, but some more rotates are available there in the lower arm. The hands are on these bends, but mine don't seem to want to budge at this moment. Well, we got a little bit of movement there. And then the fingers are on these hinges as well, so there's a little bit of bend movements there too. The same thing can be said for the other arm because it is supposed to move in a similar way. The joints are just feeling a little bit restrained at this moment. He's got a decent bend in the torso, but only moving forwards. There's no back spine movements here. We've got some twists in the torso, and for the leg movements, we also have some moving out shots here, and some moving up and down as well. Rotates here for the legs, and single bends are in the knee. Rotates for the lower leg, and bends here too in the ankle, and finally we have some bends in the toes, and that's about it for our super articulated Gollum figure. Standing test for this guy works pretty well, surprisingly. Because of the body molds though and the weird bends, he does cave in on himself pretty easily, but amazingly while I was filming, he was pretty good at standing. And so next we have the superposable Frodo, just like the superposable Gollum. I like the details on this toy for his Shire look, which to me hold up quite nicely actually compared to what I'm used to seeing by today's standards of toys. Is it a good Elijah Wood likeness? Not really, but for early 2000s, I don't think it's too bad actually. He's got that inquisitive, alright then keep your secrets look kind of going on here. I think I might like the other appearance more actually, come to think about it. It's a cool simple figure though that instantly looks recognizable from the world of Middle-earth toys, complete with hobbit feet details as well. As for his articulation, it's a lot better in my eyes than Gollum's. He features the same head movements and they feel pretty tight there, but then his arm also has some achieving bends and rotates. You can get some pretty good rotates around here as well. And then we have some double bends in the elbow joint there, plus some bends and rotates for the hands. The same movement can be found on the other side, which moves the exact same way as the arm that we just looked at. Very easy rotates in the hips, almost too easy, like it feels like it will break if I play around with this a bit more. Legs can move outwards as well. We also have some double bends here in the knees, and some rotates in the legs and bends in the feet. Frodo's been one of the easier figures here to stand just because of his parts used, thicker pieces compared to Gollum, so he hasn't been giving me any trouble at all. We have just one accessory for this guy, it's his book that he reads at the beginning of the movie. Frodo's able to hold it in his hands as well, pretty cool actually. Taking a look at a bigger sized character now, this here is Aragorn, and size comparison quickly to Frodo just shows how tall this guy is. Detail wise as well, I'm really impressed with this figure. He does feature a good amount of details like the chainmail and the rubber material used for his shirt to help showcase a clear difference between the plastic for the rest of the body. I don't think that's a great looking Viggo Mortensen though, to be fair. I think he ended up having the hardest time with toy translations though, because most of those Aragorn figures are pretty rough to look at actually. Compared to the sealed figure here though, I think it's like a work of art. I mentioned in most of the videos covering details like this, I love the mixed use of materials used for clothing on toys. That rubber for his shirt really helps to show the contrasting differences between the parts used here, and it's always one of my favourite features. Compared to that Frodo and Gollum, this was a really impressive figure to look at right before the equally impressive Legolas figure. Play feature wise, he squeezes on his legs and he slashes his arm up. I've had quite a few figures in the past from Lord of the Rings that could do stuff like this. It feels like it was the standard feature to me for this toy line. Works decently well, just some minor movements is all it needs to be pretty effective. If I give him his sword though, the trouble is he can barely hold on to the thing, so it just flies out. Going over his articulation now, Aragorn can move his head around, and the arm also features some movements. We've got bends in the elbow, and the hand can move around too, and the same can be said for the other arm, but that clicking sound that you can hear right now is the gears linking his legs to the sword slashing feature, so it does feel pretty restrictive. His waist also has some movements, but again, it feels linked to that feature, so there's not too much going on there. His legs don't actually seem to be able to move outwards either. They can move forward, but that's about it. We've got some rotates made available to us here and some double bends in the knee joints as well. The lower legs can also rotate around and then bends and rotates in both of the feet and in the toes. Standing test for Aragorn here, very simple, no fuss with this guy, nice to see. Very simple and easy accessories, he has a sword and a small knife, and I briefly showed that he can't actually hold his sword very well, so you can imagine the difficulty we have with that tiny knife. You open his fingers slightly to be holding the sword, and then you close them up again when you want it in place. The sword just essentially sits there, and it comes loose very easily. The super tiny knife, it just falls right through. There's no point in even trying with this thing. As for the other hand, the exact same thing. He just cannot interact with this knife here, but the hand does hold the sword a little bit more decently than I thought it would, but then you don't have any cool feature. Honestly, the better interaction here is just putting the weapons away in the sheath. It's not the preferred interaction, but it works better. And then finally we have here Legolas, who shares a lot of the same compliments that I've given out to the other figures during this video. That likeness to Orlando Bloom I think isn't quite there, but the likeness towards an elf seems to be pretty solid to me. Here he is compared to that still sealed figure, and I think they both work and fail in different ways compared to one another. You can see that he still has the rubber bands around his hands though, holding onto his weapons in place, and by simply touching them they just crumble into pieces. They're that old. So I spent a couple of minutes just removing all that extra gunk, and now our figure looks pretty good and new for the review. Legolas has some really cool details as well, like his cape and his clothing attire ready for that final battle. I just want to head straight into the articulation because he does have the most amount of accessories to cover. He's got some head movements here, but the hair is pretty frustrating to part out. It's really stuck in the way of movements. Otherwise, his arms do have the ability to move outwards. It's pretty tough to manage here though. We do have some rotates here and bends in the elbows as well. Hands also feature some bends, and then the same movements can be found on the other arm there. He features rotates in the waist and some good leg movement as well. He actually can move his legs outwards, but not by too much. He's got bends in the knees and some rotates in the legs and bends in the feet as well. Standing test for this guy, he's actually given me a little bit of trouble. That cape is really heavy and his legs are pretty weak, so it's a good thing he actually includes a display stand. His display base is a rock-like design, and it features two pegs for his feet and a button for sound effects, pretty similar to Sam's display as well. A few of the figures in the line did feature really cool displays like this. I opened it up to see what the inside looked like, and you can see that the batteries batteries included were all corroded by this point. I don't actually have any of these batteries on hand unfortunately, so I won't be able to see if he speaks today. The other accessories included here were an overabundance of weapons. First here we have his bow with working string. It was really cool to see something like this again because even some modern day toys sometimes feature bows without the strings. He also included a handful of arrows, which again, another accessory that's usually missing from archer based figures these days. Then we have these two blades, which are pretty standard for Legolas. And finally a big sword, which I forget he ends up using in the movies post Fellowship of the Ring. Standing him on the base here is pretty simple. His fig just pegs in like so, and he stands nice and tall. It's still a bit of a battle between the heavy cape and easy to bend knees though. Holding his bow is also a little tricky. The hand has been molded specifically for this, but it was still pretty tough to actually get it in. Once in though, that string means that you can pull an arrow back and actually send it flying. I did have a couple of Legolas figures back in the day whose play feature was the ability to fire arrows using a similar pullback feature as shown on that Aragorn toy. Really cool stuff to see in person. The sword fits in the other hand nice and easily, as well as either one of his two daggers. As for putting all of those weapons away, the sword goes in here at the front, and then the daggers are all placed here at the back. Really easy, and it looks pretty cool too. The arrows can fit one by one. Trying to get them all in at once does lead to blockage though, so this here was the absolute best that I could get everything in place, and even still, one of those arrows is basically falling out and the other one has to be held in his hand. That's my look at some of the Lord of the Rings figures from the Toybiz line back from the early 2000s. It's a really cool line of toys, especially for the price at the time of $20 NZD, which is about 36 NZD today with inflation, which is still cheaper than a Hasbro figure for frame of reference, where those figures in this country are ranged between I think around $45 at the lowest to almost $60 depending on the store that you go to. It's a nostalgic line of toys for me, and compared to the Diamond Select toys, which I admit look incredible, I just can't justify the NZD price tag on those individual figures compared to this. About $75 Australian per figure on Amazon AU for me. This bundle here cost me 100 NZD. Lord of the Rings toys are pretty common to find still in the NZ aftermarkets here. It feels like every family had these back in the day, so that's just our privilege of living in the country that started it all, I guess. I plan on seeking out more of these throughout the year if the prices and items seem worthwhile, but otherwise, thank you very much for watching. Liking this video and subscribing to the channel does help to support more videos like this one in the future. Thank you very much everyone. Hope to see you next time. Take care.